Hello everyone. Today I'm going to discuss about the gastric and also duodenal ulcers. So these are nothing but the peptic ulcers. So in this topic, I'm going to discuss about the what are the gastric ulcers and duodenal ulcers, what are the causative factors, and also what are the pathophysiology, symptomology, and clinical features, and what are the clinical diagnostic features, also how we are going to physically examine how to identify the duodenal ulcers and gastric ulcers, what is the medical management, and also what is the surgical management we are going to discuss in this topic. So this gastric ulcers and also duodenal ulcers is nothing but is a peptic ulcers. So these peptic ulcers are the source that develop in the lining of the stomach. So it's nothing but the ulcers in the stomach. So depends upon the involvement of the site. So it's divided into three types. So that is the duodenal ulcers, gastric ulcers, and esophageal ulcers. And so these are usually results of the inflammation caused by the bacteria. So which is called as is the Helicobacter pylori. So this is a bacteria because of H. pylori, normally called as H. pylori, as well as the form the erosion from the stomach acids. So because of these bacterial infections, it alters the stomach functions and also it damages the mucosa of the lining mucosa of the stomach. So it may lead to the increasing the inflammation in the stomach. It alters the HCl concentration. It may give the ulcers in the stomach. So if it ulcers occurs in the esophagus, so these ulcers are called as esophageal ulcers. So if the ulcers in the stomach, so it is called as the gastric ulcers. So, and also if it ulcer in the duodenum, so it is called as the duodenal ulcers. So these ulcers are is a fairly common health problems. So these are the commonest, most common nowadays. Many people, if you see in the 100% of the people, so at least anytime they are going to be experience these peptic ulcers, at least the 40 to 50% of the people may experience like a gastric ulcers and also duodenal ulcers in their lifetime period. So because of so many reasons are there for the gastric ulcers. So if you see here, so this gastric ulcers, this ulcer develop inside the stomach. So inside the stomach, so it's called as the gastric ulcers. Esophageal ulcers that develop inside the esophagus. So if the esophagus is going to be connecting to the stomach. So if any ulcers occurs in the esophagus, so it gives the esophageal ulcers called as esophageal ulcers. So duodenal ulcers that develop in the upper part of the small intestine. So if you see the small intestine, so the small intestine divided into the duodenum and jejunum and ileum. So in the small intestine upper part is called as the duodenum. So most of the ulcers are going to be formed in the duodenum. So 80% of the ulcers are commonly seen in the duodenum regions. So that also called as duodenal ulcers. So these peptic ulcers are more likely to be in the duodenum than the stomach. So 80% of the peptic ulcers are going to be seen in the duodenum than the gastric ulcers. As a rule, they occur alone, but they may occurs in the multiple. So it's going to be occurs in the multiple. So chronic gastric ulcers tend to occurs in the lesser curvature of the stomach near the pylorus. So if you see the so many types of the ulcers are there, so according to the lesions or locations is divided into the so many types of the gastric ulcers. So if you see the gastric ulcers, so these are going to be so type 1 and also type 2, type 3, and type 4. So if you see the type 1, so in this type 1 gastric ulcers are going to occurs in the lesser curvature. So here is going to be the more like ulcers are going to be occurs in the lesser curvature. So it's called as type 1 gastric ulcers. So if the type 2 gastric ulcers are, so these are the combined gastric ulcers. So within the duodenal ulcers, so is going to get the is a lesser curvature one ulcers as well as duodenal ulcers also going to get. So these are called as the type 2 gastric ulcers. So occurs in the lesser curvature, that is inside the stomach curvature, and also duodenum. So this is called as the type 2. So these are going to be combined with the gastric ulcers and also with the duodenal ulcers. Type 3 ulcers are going to be, these are going called as the pre-pyloric ulcers. So this is a pyloric sphincter. So this is the just before the pyloric sphincter. So any ulcers in the pyloric regions. So this is called as the pre-pyloric ulcers. So next one is the fourth one ulcer is called as the gastric ulcers, that is the proximal stomach or cardia. So at the region of the cardia, So is going to be this let's say the is going to be at the esophageal sphincter. So if any ulcers formation in between the connection between the esophagus and also stomach region, so it is called as cardia, also called as proximal stomach. So if any ulcer occur in the proximal to the stomach, so it is a grade 4 ulcer or type 4 ulcers. So type 1 is going to be lesser curvature. Type 2 is the combination of the lesser curvature and also is the duodenal ulcers. So type 3 is going to the pre-pyloric. Type 4 will be the proximal stomach. So these are the 4 types of the gastric ulcers. So who are going to get these peptic ulcers more prone to affected? That means who are the risk factors who are going to get the more peptic ulcers? So the risk factors are the peptic ulcers are in 1 in 10 people develop in the ulcers. So these risk factors are going to be especially who are using more painkiller tablets. So who are habituated to painkillers or who are having any any joint pains or because of the any pains. So who are addicted to non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, so such as the ibuprofen. So these are the painkillers is one of the causative factors for the peptic ulcers. And also in history of the any family history of the ulcer, so sometimes you may chance to get the genetic defects who already got the peptic ulcers in the family, so may chance to get in the children's and also may chance to in the family. And also who got who already have some diseases such as the liver, kidney and lung disease also may chance to get the peptic ulcers. And also who already addicted to smoking and alcohol also may chance to get these peptic ulcers. So especially who already like a chronic smokers and also regular heavy drinking people may chance to get the risk, may chance to get the peptic ulcers. So coming to the causative factors for the peptic ulcers are the duodenal and gastric ulcers. So the people used to think the stress or certain food could cause the ulcers. So because of the before the research studies, so most of the people believed that and also spicy food and also stress also one of the causative factor for the causative factor for the peptic ulcers. But after the research, so they identified so the stress and also spicy food is not a exact causative factor for the peptic ulcers. So it's not is completely declared that the spicy food may chance to give the peptic ulcers. But researchers haven't found any evidence to support those theories. Instead, studies have revealed two main causative factors. So only researchers. So instead of these studies, so they revealed only two main causative factors. The two main causative factors are the one is the bacteria, that is the Helicobacter pylori, and also next one is the pain relieving, that is NSAIDs medication, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. These are the two major causative factors for the gastric and also duodenal ulcers. So how this Helicobacter pylori is the causative factor for the peptic ulcers. So this is going to be some effects in the infects the stomach. And also this one is about 50% of the people are in the 50% of the world population has this H. pylori infections, often without any symptoms. So researchers believe that people can transmit this H. pylori from one person to one person, especially during the childhood, because of the transmission of this bacteria may chance to get in the childhood. If they share any food from any like a if they share any vessels or because of the spoon or fork or maybe any like a food material or food boxes may chance to get this H. pylori bacteria. And also this bacteria stick to the layer of the mucus in the digestive tract, causes the inflammation. So if after infecting this H. pylori, so it's going to give the inflammation, and also it's going to irritation to the mucosa of the stomach. So which can cause the protective lining is going to be breakdown. If you see the inside the stomach is having the layers of the walls are going to be producing these mucus secreting cells. So because of the damage of these secreting cells, these layers are going to be decreasing the mucus productions. So this breakdown problem causes Stomach contains the strong acid is intended to digest the food without the mucus layer to protect it. And the acid can eat the stomach tissues. So because of the damage of these protecting layers in the stomach, so because of these protecting layers, if there is no like a protecting layers, so the acid concentration is going to be increased inside the stomach. So if any acid concentration is increased, so this acid is going to eat the tissues. So it leads to the ulcer formations. Eat the tissues means it's going to break down the tissues. So because of, if the mucus production is there, so this mucus is going to protect from the HCl concentration. So if there is no mucus secretion from the secreting walls, so it may give the acid concentration is going to increase. So because of the acid, so it's going to damage the stomach walls. So it gives the ulcerations. However, for the most people, the presence of the H. pylori doesn't have the negative impact. Only 10 to 15% of the people is H. pylori end up developing the ulcers. So many people are going to get these infections, but it's not going to give all the people are not going to get the ulcers formations. Only 10 to 15 percentage of the people only is going to get the ulcer formations. So it depends upon their immunity and depends upon some associated risk factors. So who already having some other complications such as the intestinal disorders and also liver and also stomach and also pulmonary and also kidney diseases. So these are going to be associated with these diseases, and also those people may chance to get the ulcers in the gastric and also duodenal ulcers. So that is the H. pylori is the infections. And also another causative factor for the peptic ulcers is the painkillers. So these painkillers, especially the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, so these drugs are going to, who are addicted or sometimes who are using prolonged time are, so it may chance to get the damage of this intestinal mucosa or in the stomach mucosa. So because of these medications may damage the stomach walls, so it leads to the abnormal secretion in the mucus. So it also gives the ulceration formations. So these can wear away the mucus layer. So this also the damage the mucus layer of the digestive tract. So these medications is a potential cause of the peptic ulcers. So especially is the aspirin, naproxen, ibuprofen, and also is going to be the NSAIDs, especially Celebrex, Cabenuva, and also these are going to the main causative factors for the damage of the stomach wall damage. So it leads to the peptic ulcers. And also other rare causative factors are going to be if anybody the heal from the previous infection. So that means if any immune system damage. So if they're not like they're not strong, or maybe if any heal disease conditions may chance to get because of those people are going to take the more medications, and also this type of medications also may alter the gastric secretions. So it leads to the peptic ulcers. But major causes are the only two causes. Those are the H. pylori bacteria, that's a bacteria, and also these painkillers. And also other rare causative factors are the having surgery and taking other medications such as steroids. So in case of anybody having undergone for surgery, and also is going to, if anybody using the steroids also may chance to get the peptic ulcers. And also other causative factor for the genetic links. So that means who are having the predisposing factors are especially the blood type. The blood type who are the more susceptible for the peptic ulcer is the blood is a O group, that is a O positive or negative. Then so these people are may chance to get the peptic ulcer, then the A and also AB positive, positive or negative. And also these peptic ulcers are associated with any other diseases such as the chronic pulmonary disease and also chronic renal disease. So especially the duodenal ulcers are going to be associated with this pulmonary disease and also renal disease. And another causative factor is the stress. So who are prone to like a more stress, or who are already having the anxiety or depression and stress. So this also may chance to get the peptic ulcers. So these are going to be, so these ulcers are which are clinically different from the peptic ulcers. The ulceration in the mucosa that can occur in the gastroduodenal area. So these ulcers may occur in patients who are exposed to stressful conditions. Though these are going to be slightly different to the peptic ulcers, but it may also going to damage the stomach walls and also intestinal mucosa. It may use the same symptoms like gastric ulcers and also duodenal ulcers. So if we see the comparison between the gastric ulcers and duodenal ulcers, so these gastric ulcers and duodenal ulcers are going to be, if you see the incidence in the duodenal ulcers is going to be age between the 30 years to 60 years of age group, but in the gastric ulcers are going to be over the 50 years. But in the female and also male ratio, in the male ratio, it's around 2 to 3% to in the male, and also is a even 2 to 3 is to 1, means 1 is will be in the females. So double to the male and female ratio. But in the gastric ulcers is going to be equal in the male and female. So, and also the incidence is going to be 80% are going to be the peptic ulcers in the duodenal regions, that is called the duodenal ulcers, and also only 10 to 15% is going to be the gastric ulcers. So these duodenal ulcers are also going to be more prone and also more common than the gastric ulcers. So the signs and symptoms of the gastric ulcers and duodenal ulcers. So if you see the duodenal ulcers are going to be the hypersecretion of the HCl concentrations. But in the gastric ones is going to be normal or hyposecretions. Maybe is going to be normal or the less secretion of the HCl concentrations. And also may have the weight gain. So here the gastric ulcers may chance to get the weight loss. So the pain occurs 2 to 3 hours. And also here the pain occurs half hour to the 1 hour. So after the meal, the pain is going to occur after the meal, often awake between the 2 to like a 1 a.m. to 2 a.m. In the midnights, this pain is going to be more severe in the duodenal ulcers. So these are going to be rarely occurs in the night time. So these are the difference between the gastric ulcers and also duodenal ulcers. And also ingestion of the food relieves the pain. And also here is going, ingestion of the food does not help. So sometimes increase the pain. So if they take the food inside, so these duodenal ulcers are going to relieve the pain symptoms. But in the gastric ulcers is not going to be help, or sometimes if you take the food, the pain is going to be increased. So because of these are going to be is the gastric that means in the stomach. So these are going to be the small intestine ulcers. So here the vomiting is uncommon. So because of the duodenum, but this is going to be common. So because it may chance to get the reflex from the stomach and also may regurgitate into the esophagus and also may chance to get the vomiting sensation. And also coming to the hemorrhage less likely within the gastric ulcers. So, but it's present in the melena. So that means hemorrhage is going to be lesser, but may be present if it's going to be melena. So this melena means that nothing but the blood like a stools. The stools are going to be mixed with the blood. So, so that is called as melena. More common than the hematemesis. So that means going to be blood vomiting is the less, but this going to be the black color stools, or maybe the blood, the stools becomes with the comes with the sticky blood. So more likely to perforate than the gastric ulcers. So these are going to be duodenal ulcers are going to be more damage. So more piercing into the tissues. So it's going to give the large. So if you see here, so these are the gastric ulcers. So these are going to be more perforated. More damage is going to see in the duodenal ulcers. So in the gastric ulcers, so hemorrhage more likely to occur than the duodenal. So here is going to be more hemorrhage, and also this hematemesis is more common than the melena. So here is going to be the blood vomitings are more. So because of the damage of the mucosa, so because of the bleeding inside the gastric, so it may use the irritation as well as it may use the reflex. So because of this reflex, the esophageal sphincter may chance to get the open, so it may chance to get the vomitings, that's a blood vomitings. And also who are having the duodenal ulcers may chance to get the malignancy or maybe cancers. And these are going to be very occasionally may chance to get the malignancy in the gastric ulcers. So the risk factors for the duodenal ulcers are going to be who are taking the heavy alcohol and also chronic smoking and also H. pylori infections, cirrhosis of the liver and also stress. So these are the risk factors for the duodenal ulcers. And also gastric ulcers also is H. pylori infections, alcohol and smoking, and also non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. And stress also, the both are same, but here is gastric ulcers are going to be, especially is going to be more like a effects is going to be in the gastric, in the stomach. So the absorption is going to be in the stomach. So that's why may chance to get the ulcers in the stomach. So because of the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. So coming to the pathophysiology, if you see the pathophysiology, so how the ulcers are going to be formed. So because of the peptic ulcers, so these peptic ulcers occurs mainly in the gastroduodenal mucosa because of this tissue cannot withstand the digestive action of the gastric acid and pepsin. So because of the pepsin and also gastric, that is HCl concentrations, so these are going to be damaged. So just now we discussed, because of the damage of the lining of the stomach, so it won't produce the mucus. So because of the less mucus inside the stomach, so the acid is going to be damage the stomach walls. So it may give the ulcers in the stomach as well as in the stomach as well as the duodenum. So the erosion is caused by the increasing concentration or activity of the acid pepsin. So that is nothing but its HCl concentrations or decreased resistance to the mucosa. So because of the no mucosa, so no mucous membrane, and also so if the high concentration of the HCl is going to damage the walls of the stomach as well as the duodenum. A damaged mucosa cannot secrete enough mucus act as a barrier against the HCl. So if the damaged mucus, it won't release the mucus. So this mucus only protecting against from the HCl. If there is no mucus, this HCl is going to be work on the like a walls of the stomach. It's going to give the ulcers. The use of the non-steroidal inflammatory drugs inhibit the secretion of the mucus that protect the mucosa. So these drugs are going to stop the mucus formations and also damage the mucus layer. Patients with the duodenal ulcers disease secretes the more acid than the normals, whereas the patients with the gastric ulcers tend to secretes the normal or decreased level of the acids. So who are having a gastric ulcers, so the HCl concentration is maybe normal or maybe decreased. But in the duodenal ulcers, the HCl concentration is going to be high. So that is the difference between the duodenal and also gastric ulcers. And coming to the stress ulcers, so stress ulcer also is the term given to the acute mucosal ulcerations. So is and also of the duodenal or gastric area that occurs after the physiologically stressful events such as the burns, shock, or severe sepsis or multiple organ traumas. So in case of any like a sepsis, any infections or any burns, in case of any burns or any shock, or maybe is because of the secretion of the maybe high bleeding. So and also any multiple organ traumas also may chance to get the stressful ulcers. So the difference of the opinion exists as to actual cause of the mucosal ulceration in the cell ulcers. So it depends upon the causative factors are going to be, the opinions are going to be different. Usually it is preceded by the shock. So if anybody get the loss of the blood or the hypovolemic shock or maybe septic shock, any infections also may chance to get these peptic ulcers. So because of this decreasing the gastric mucosal blood flow and also esophageal reflex or the duodenum contents in the stomach. So because of the increase in acid levels in the stomach may gives the reflex and also it may gives the releasing the pepsin. So this because of the high concentration of the HCl and also pepsin, it may gives the reflex esophagus and also they may chance to get the high concentrations. So it gives that is the excessive secretions of the acid and also it may regurgitate into the esophagus. So these are the main changes in the stress ulcers. And also another pathological change, the combination of the ischemia, acid, pepsin creates an ideal climate for the ulcerations. So the physiological changes, so because of these reflexes, it is going to decrease in the blood circulations. So that means acid also going to be increased, decrease the blood circulations, and also pepsin and also high concentration of acid and pepsin. So these are all are combined together is going to create the environment for the ulceration formations. So that is the physiological changes, pathophysiological changes. So these ulcerations, so is going to give the more damage to the, especially to the mucosal walls, and also it giving the excessive amount of the secretions of the acid. So it may give the duodenogastro-esophageal reflex. So these are going to be like if any increasing the secretions, the gastric regions. So these secretions because of the high concentration of the HCl and pepsin. So these sphincters are going to be so because of the excessive accumulation of the acid and also this HCl, hydrochloric acid and also pepsin, so it may chance to get the regurgitate into the esophagus. So the sphincters are going to be open here. So the sphincters are open. So it's going to allowing the reflex. So these acids are going to be regurgitated into the esophagus. So that is called as the gastroesophageal reflex disease. And also next one is the stress ulcers. So these are going to be should be distinguished from the Cushing ulcers and also curling ulcers. So these are nothing but the Cushing ulcers are the gastric and duodenal esophageal ulcers arising in the patients with the intracranial injury or operations. So that means who are having the some brain injuries or brain tumors. So those people are made chance to get these Cushing ulcers. And also the curling ulcers are going to be who are having some septic like a shock, or maybe in case of the burns and trauma, so multiple organ trauma may chance to get these curling ulcers. So it's going to be a proximal duodenum and also associated with the severe burn or trauma. So these are going different type of the ulcers. So it's going to give and also these curling ulcers is frequently observed about the 20 to 72 hours after the extensive burns. So if anybody exposed to the burns, so after the 72 hours, so these curlings ulcers may chance to get. So these are the pathophysiological changes of the ulcers, peptic ulcers. So what are the signs and symptoms of these peptic ulcers? So especially the symptoms are going to be, they are going to get the heartburn. So uh, because of the regurgitation of the acid, especially the gastroesophageal reflex, so they will get the heartburns. And also because of the heartburns, so they are not going to feel hungry, so lots of hepatite and vomiting and nausea. So because of the HCl, high HCl concentration and also pepsin, so because of this reflex, so unable to take the food content, and also they may use the vomiting and also nausea, vomiting sensation. And also because of the this high concentration of HCl, they're going to feel the bloating, so they may chance to get the burping. So because of the intake of less intake of the food, may chance to get the weight loss and severe the are maybe dull pain and burning sensation in the stomach and fatigue. So these are the common symptoms of the duodenal and also gastric ulcers. So especially the major symptom is going to be the heartburn. So because of these pepsin and also because of the HCl concentrations, so it because of the regurgitation of these acids into the esophagus. So these are going to be the major cause to major symptoms of the peptic ulcers. So how we are going to assess the peptic ulcers? So what are the investigation procedures for the peptic ulcers? First one is going to be the investigations or the physical examinations. So is going to be the may reveal the pain. So especially, so the symptom, the pain will be in the epigastric regions and also tenderness. Epigastrical region is going to be the tenderness. That means if you palpate and if you press in the epigastric regions, so the person is going to complain the pain and also is going to the abdominal distension. So the person is going to get the abdominal distension because of the bloating. So it may use the abdominal distension, abdominal, the tummy bulge may chance to get because of the gastric gas accumulations. And also the investigation procedure is going to be is nothing but is a radiological investigation procedures such as the barium swallowing. So this the barium swallowing is nothing but is going to be the small like pills are going to be swallow or maybe pudding are going to be swallow. So this barium is going to be is into the especially study for the pharynx, esophagus and also stomach. So if they swallow this barium, so if you take the investigation procedure such as the radiological X-ray and that's called as the fluoroscopy, so we can identify where exactly having the ulcer formations. So this barium studies is going to clear the upper, especially is going to be the upper GI tract. Upper GI tract means is a pharynx and also esophagus and also stomach and also small intestine. So this everything is called the upper gastrointestinal tract. So if any ulcers formation in the esophagus or stomach and duodenum, so we can find easily with this barium studies. So this going to be is a direct visualization of the inflammatory changes, ulcers, and also lesions of the biopsy. So we are going to be identify with the barium swallowings. So with the barium swallowing, so is going to give the clear information, clear pictures we can identify in the this radiological investigations. So these barium investigations, so these gastric ulcers usually seen as round and also ovoid collection of the barium, but they can also be the linear or rod or star shaped. So these linear ulcers are often observed in the healing stages. So this going to depends upon the type or depends upon the shape of the appearance of these ulcers is going to give the what type of the ulcers. Is it the acute ulcers, or maybe is the healing stage of the ulcers? So this especially is going to be gives the, it will be the linear or rod or star shaped appearance. So if the linear ulcers are observed commonly in the healing stage of the ulcers, ulcers smaller than the 5 mm and also may not be detected in the barium studies. If the very small ulcers, so these barium studies are not going to be helpful. And also ulcers may vary from the 3 mm to the more than 5 centimeters. So these going to the giant ulcers are going to be above the 3 centimeters. So have the risks of the complications such as bleeding and also perforations. If it is more than 3 centimeters, so it is going to give the ulcerations and also the bleeding inside and also damage to the walls, and also is going to give the more perforations, more damage to in the intestines, especially in the small and duodenum as well as the gastric ulcers. So this barium is going to give the clear informations. And also another investigation procedures are the investigation of the stools. So that means that stool cultures. So this going to be is especially for the H. pylori bacteria. So this going to periodically until they're negative for the occult blood. So that means if any blood clot in the stools, or just now we discussed melena. So depends upon the type of the ulcers, especially in the duodenal ulcers, we are going to find that's a melena. The blood in the stools, maybe we can find it. And also another investigation, that's the gastric secretory studies. So these gastric secretory studies are going to be identified. So we are going to diagnose with the eclohydria. So eclohydria means, so in case of the, especially in case of the gastric ulcers, so the gastric ulcers, the gastric secretion such as the HCl may chance to get the like a less production of the HCl, or maybe normal productions. So if any less productions are is absence of the HCl concentration in the gastric juices, so it indicates the gastric ulcers. So there we can identify. And also in case of the the chest conditions, that is the another type of the disease. So it's going to be the, if any infections or tumors in the intestine, small intestines, the tumors are going to be 1 or 2 tumors are going to be occurs in the small intestine. So these secretions are going to be absent in case of eclohydria and also in the GES. And also next one is we are going to investigation procedure is the H. pylori infections. So these are going to be identified through the culture and also in the histology and biopsy. So different type of the, if you take some tissues from the intestine, especially the stomach and also duodenum. So if we send to the histopathological labs, so we can find the, so if we send to the culture, so we are going to identify the H. pylori bacteria. So that also one of the investigation procedures. And also another test is the breath test. This is the simple test. So in this simple test, so we are going to identify these H. pylori infections. So these are this patient will swallow a pills, the small pills like small pills, or maybe liquid, or maybe pudding, some type of pudding, so that contain the carbon molecules. So these are going to be, if they swallow these like a pills, so who are having like H. pylori infections, so they may chance to release the carbon. So when the solution broke down into the stomach, so if we can identify easily with this breath test, so these are going to be like a small pills and also liquid, or maybe pudding I have to swallow. So these are going to detect the H. pylori bacteria. So these are going to find with these investigation procedures. So other than these things, and also we have to do the endoscopy. So with the endoscopy, we can send the flexible tube into the stomach through the mouth and also pharynx, esophagus and stomach and to the small intestine. So these things are going to be upper endoscopy. We are going to detect the where they're having the ulcer formation in the stomach. So with a small like a video guided tube, so this video guided tube is going to insert it into the mouth and the esophagus and stomach. So we can easily identify where they're having the like ulcers and what type of the ulcers we are going to identify. And coming to the what is the management of the peptic ulcers. So these managements depends upon the causative factors. So if the causative factor is if the H. pylori bacteria, or because of the NSAIDs are non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. If the ulcers are due to like NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, they immediately have to stop the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. with under the supervision of the physicians. So if you explain, so what symptoms you are facing with the medications, if you complain to the doctor, so doctors are going to modify the painkillers, so it may reduce that means the severity of the peptic ulcers. So the treatment depends upon the underlying causative factors. If test shows that is H. pylori infections, so they are going to, if you inform to the doctors, so they are going to give the some medications. So this is the antibiotics are going to give to kill the bacteria. It's a H. pylori bacteria. So these medications are especially the antibiotics such as the amoxicillin and clarithromycin, metronidazole, tetracycline, and tidindazole. So these medications will help to stop the growth of the H. pylori and kill the bacteria and to prevent the formation of the H, like a peptic ulcers. So these are going to be sometimes are going to be combination of the drugs. So sometimes depends upon the severity and also causative factors. So the doctors are going to give the different type of the drugs. So if you see here, so these drugs are going to be like a combinations. So here is the amoxicillin capsule is going to be 500 mg, and also clarithromycin tablets are going to be 500 mg. These are going to be combined together. This is the like a combination of the doses. And also some other drugs are the metronidazole, that is a flagyl 400 mg, and tetracycline, and also tidindazole is going to be the 500 mg. So these are the different type of the drugs are going to used to stop the growth of the H. pylori. And also if they sometimes they are going to use the clarithromycin and also omeprazole. Omeprazole is nothing but is the uh, proton pump inhibitors. So some another drugs are going to prevent the peptic ulcers and to manage the peptic ulcer. So these combination of the drugs are going to use to reduce the and also effect of the peptic ulcer severity. But if these also may chance to get the some like a side effects, who got some people may experience with diarrhea and also dehydration, headache, and stomach pain also may chance to get, depends upon the person to persons, may chance to get the side effects. If you get any side effects immediately, if you explain to the or if you inform to the your healthcare physicians, so they are going to be modified according to your signs and symptoms. So and also it will be different to person to person. And also another drugs are going to be some medications, especially the proton pump inhibitors. So these proton pump inhibitors are going to be reducing this HCl concentrations, as well as is going to reduce the pepsin concentrations. So these proton pump inhibitors to help to reduce the stomach acid. So especially that is the HCl concentrations. So that is the importance of the proton pump inhibitors. So these proton pump inhibitors are, so the medications are the pantoprazole, is a lasoprozole, and also omeprazole, esomeprazole, and rabeprazole. So if you see all the medications are the zoles, so it's a group of under the zoles. So it's going to ozoles. So these are mainly help to reducing the HCl concentration in the stomach. So, but this is going to be depends upon this medication is going to be is a 40 mg and also 20 mg. So it depends upon the most commonly the pantoprazole for the adult, it will be the 40 mg. So it depends upon the severity. So these medications have to take with the empty stomach in the morning, so before taking any food. So this will help to reduce the concentration of the HCl in the stomach. So before food, if you take, so the HCl concentration is going to be decreased. So then there's going to be the irritation is going to be decreased. So after taking this pantoprazole. So these depends upon the persons, and also the physicians are going to prescribe either pantoprazole or omeprazole or rabeprazole. So this is going to be different person to person, it will be vary. And also these are going to be also may chance to give some side effects. So it depends upon the person to person, especially the dry mouth and also diarrhea and also headache. And also, so that's the reasons. So if you inform according to your signs and symptoms, so they are going to be identify the causative factors. So according to their symptoms, they're going to prescribe the exact medication for them. So, and also other than these medications, so if your doctor determines that is related to the H. pylori infections, so they may recommend the prescription of the proton, that is the proton pump inhibitors, as also the prelisoric So these are also going to be helpful to reducing the stomach as well also healing the ulcers. So these are like a fermentidins. So these are acid blockers. So these medications also help to reducing there's a high concentration of the HCl. And these medications are available as a prescriptions and also over counters for the low doses. If sometimes if the doses also we can get in the low dose, and also sometimes so we can use the some like a syrups. So these syrups are so the sucralfate also useful to reduce the stomach ulcers. So these are the some medications help to control the HCl concentration and also help to healing the peptic ulcers. So that is the medical management for the like a peptic ulcers. And also another modifications and also who are having like is anxiety and stress. So they also may chance to get the like a stress ulcers. So those people, if they take some rest and also sedatives and tranquilizers, may add to the patient's comfort or prescribed as needed. So it depends upon the patient's severity who are having like any stress disorders or any anxiety depressions. So in those conditions, so if they like if they take some sedative under the supervision of the physicians and also take some rest and also some meditation techniques, and these are going to be control the like anxiety and depressions. So it may leads to decreasing the high concentration of the HCl concentrations, so reducing the peptic ulcers. So that is about the management for the who are having the psychological and also depression and also stress. So these major tranquilizers are typically antipsychotic drugs used to treat the psychotic features such as the schizophrenia, bipolar disorders, and other mood disorders. So these medications are going to is especially in case of psychological disorders, antipsychotic drugs. So it will help to reducing the anxiety and depressions and some psychological disorders such as the schizophrenia and also bipolar disorders and mood disorders. And so minor tranquilizers are typically anxiolytic drugs used to reduce the anxiety. So these drugs are going to be helpful to reduce the anxiety and depressions. But these are going to be helpful because of these antipsychotic drugs also may chance to get these side effects. So have to take care of the side effects. That means if they find any like a symptoms side effects related to these drugs, so immediately have to inform to the physicians. So according to the symptoms, doctors are going to modify the drugs related according to the patient's conditions. And also next one is the complications of the peptic ulcers. So what are the complications? So these complications, how is going to be deteriorated? So if not, if for example, who are you are not continuing the medication properly, who are not maintaining the healthy lifestyle, again it may damage, it may chance to get the severe complications. So if they're not taking medication properly, so such as for the H. pylori, and also if they're not stopping the anti-inflammatory drugs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs such as NSAIDs, so they may chance to get the other complications. So it's going to get the perforations. So that means perforations means a hole. That means like a severe damage in the mucosa of the intestines. So may chance to get the hole develops in the lining of the stomach. So it may chance to get the hole development, or maybe small intestine causes the infections. So is going to get the perforations. That means hole they may chance to develop. So because of this hole also, it increasing the infection chances. So a signs of the perforated ulcer is sudden and severe abdominal pain. So because of these perforations or any hole in the intestines, so it may give the severe pain, abdominal pain, and also the ulcers are going to be sudden. So because of these perforations, the person may chance to get the bleeding, and also it may give the severe infections and vomitings, blood vomitings, and also epigastric pain. So all the symptoms are going to be severe. So that is the major complications in case of the peptic ulcers. And also internal bleeding. So just now we discussed because of the perforations. So because of the hole in the mucosa, again it may chance to get the bleeding inside in the walls of the stomach. So the bleeding ulcers can result in the significant blood loss. So it requires the hospitalizations. So this we may chance to get the infections and also bleeding. So it may chance to get the sepsis. So those people needs the hospitalization immediately. So because of this bleeding ulcers is including the lightheadedness dizziness, and also black stools. So who are having the internal bleeding, so may chance to get the is a melena. So that means that is the sticky and black color bleed inside the stools. So may chance to get. So who are having this bleeding, so those people may chance to get the lightheadedness and also dizziness. So these complications, if you in the physical examination, if you identify, so we can suspect those people having the internal bleeding. And also we next one is the scar tissue. The another complication is the scar tissue. So this is the scar tissue because of the development after the injury. So this makes the so difficult for the food pass through the digestive tract. So the signs of the scar tissue is including the vomiting and also weight loss. So who are having the these ulcerations, so and also who are taking some medications for the ulcerations, it may heal, but if they frequently if they get these ulcers, may chance to get the tissue become the like a very hard, so he's going to get the scar formations. So because of the scar formations or hardness in the walls of the stomach, so it may leads to the decreasing the passage of the food through the digestive tract. So unable to pass the food from the one place to another place. So because of the scar tissue formations, so decreasing the peristalsis movement. The peristalsis movements means the food passes from the one place to the other place. For example, from the mucus, for example, from the if you take the food from the mouth, the food goes to the pharynx and also esophagus. Through the smooth muscle contractions, the food make into the small bolus appearance. So one place to another place from here is going to move downwards because of the smooth muscle contractions. Because of the smooth muscle contraction, the food moves from the one place to another place, from the esophagus to the stomach, from the stomach to the small intestine. So this is going to be like a movement of the food. So in case of the scar formations, this peristalsis movement is going to be decreased. So because of the loss of peristalsis movement, so there is no proper like the food passage. So it may leads to the may chance to get the vomiting sensations. So if there is no food, there is no feeling of intake of food or no hungry, so it may chance to get the weight loss. So these are all symptoms because of the bloatedness and also abdominal distance may chance to get. So these are the most common complications in the peptic ulcers. So these are the perforations, internal bleeding, and also scar tissues. So these are the main complications, but associated with the other complications, they may chance to get the blood vomitings and also may chance to get the vomitings. So and weight loss. So these are the major complications related to the like a peptic ulcers. And also who are having the stress, so they have to take the some rest and also some stress reductions and also rest, especially some meditations and also some sedative medications. So these are going to be helpful to reduce the stress levels. And also surgical management in case of if it is a conservative management fails, for example, if this medication proton pump inhibitors and also antibiotics, if it is failed, so have to go for the surgical management. So the surgical management usually recommended for the patients with intractable ulcers. So that means is a fail to heal. So if it is a fail to healing process, so we can refer to the surgical procedures. So this is going to be after the 12 to 16th weeks of the medical treatments. So around 3 months to 4 months, if there is no proper like a improvement, so there is no healing of the ulcers, so can send and also refer for the surgical management. In case of surgical management are going to be the vagotomy with or without the pyloroplasty. And also next one is the Billroth type 1 and type 2 procedures. So these are the two types of the like a surgical management for the peptic ulcers. So, but these surgical managements are going to be in case of if the ulcers are not healed after the medical management of 3 or 4 months of the medical management. So these surgical managements are going to be vagotomy. So in the surgical vagotomy, this vagotomy is nothing but the surgical operation in which one or more branch of the vagus nerve is going to be cut. So the vagus nerve is nothing but 10th cranial nerve. So it's going to be innervated to this is going to be the is to the stomach. So these are going to reduce the rate of the gastric secretions. So because of the main problem is going to be increasing the HCl concentration. So if the increasing the HCl concentration, the acid concentration will be increased. So it leads to the damage of the walls of the stomach. So if we cut this vagus nerve, so which is supplies to the stomach, so now the HCl concentration is going to be decreased. If no HCl concentration, so what happens? So the concentration also is going to be less, and also it won't affect on the walls of the stomach. So that is the main surgical effect of the vagotomy. So the serving of the vagus nerve, so decreasing the gastric acid by diminishing the cholinergic stimulations to the parietal cells, so making them less responsive to the gastrin. So the gastrin is going to be less responsive, and also may be done via the open surgical approach or laparoscopy or thoracoscopy. So different type of the surgical procedures. So I have to the laparoscopic means is open. These are all the surgical procedures, or maybe they have to go with like a endoscopic also they are going to do, but depends upon the surgeon decisions. So they are going to do the either the laparoscopic or is a thoracoscopic, is opening the thorax, and also they are going to do, or laparoscopic they are going to do. So these are the some surgical procedures to control the gastric secretions, HCl, especially the HCl. And also next one is the pyloroplasty. So this is a surgical procedures to widen the opening of the lower part of the stomach. So the pylorus is going to be enlarged here. So this pylorus is going to be open and also enlarged. So the stomach content can empty into the small intestine, so which is the duodenum, very easily. So if you see here, so this is the normal pylorus, right? So the connection between the stomach and also duodenum. So if you see the sphincters are going to be the less space. So if you open and widen this content, the pyloroplasty, that means enlarging the pyloric sphincters. So it widen the area. So it easily pass this food content easily from the to the intestines. That's a small intestine, which is the duodenum. So this is going to be the thick mucus area. When it thickens, the food cannot pass through it. So if it is thickened, it's not possible. So if you open, the food pass directly very easily from the stomach to small intestine. So here is going to be the longitudinal incision made into the pylorus and also transversely sutured close to the enlarged the outlet and also release the muscle. So here is going to be a longitudinal incision is going to be happen here. It's going to done. So here if it is open, so the food particles are going to be enter from the stomach into the duodenum very easily. So in these conditions is going to be releasing the HCl concentration is going to be decreased and also helpful to send the food particles easily from the stomach to the like a duodenum. So these are the two types of the surgical procedures. The first one is the vagotomy and also the pyloroplasty. So another one is the gastroduodenectomy. So this gastroduodenectomy is a surgical procedure where the new connection between the stomach and also duodenum. Normally is going to be, if you see here, so is going to be at the, so if you see here, so this is the stomach and also duodenum, that is the first part of the small intestine. But here is going to be the removal of the lower portion of the antrum of the stomach. So this portion is going to be removed in the is antrectomy. So that this portion of the stomach is going to be removed. So which contains the cell secretes the gastrin. So as well as the small portion of the duodenum and the pylorus. So the remaining segment is anastomotic with the duodenum. Here, the small part of the lower part of the stomach is going to be resect. That means removed. So why? So because of this area is going to be secreting the gastrin. So if you remove, the gastrin is going to be decreased. So the concentration is also going to be decreased. So automatically, this is going to be connected to the duodenum. So this is called as the Billroth, the type 1 surgical procedures. So if they removed and also if they connected to the jejunum, so it is called as the Billroth is going to be type 2. So it's going to be it's not going to connect it to the jejunum. So this surgical procedure is called as a Billroth type 2. This is a surgical procedure. So this is surgical procedure is called as gastroduodenostomy. So ostomy means opening the stomach, and also duodenum is going to resect these areas. So in the first one is going to be removing the antrum of the stomach. So if this antrum is contains the gastric secretion cells. So if you remove this one, is the gastric secretion is going to be decreased. So we can control the HCl concentration. So coming to the next one is removal of the distal third of the stomach. So distal third of the stomach is going to be removed, antrectomy, and also anastasum is the duodenum and jejunum. So here is going to, because of the remove the gastrin producing cells, and also antrum, the part of the parietal cells. So these are going to be the Billroth type 1 and type 2 secretions, type 2, types of the type 1 and type 2 surgical procedures. So if we remove this antrum, so that we can reduce the HCl concentration, help to reducing the production of the HCl. So these are the some surgical procedures. So these are going to be helpful to control the high HCl concentration and to reduce the damage of the intestinal mucosa. So these are the some surgical procedures, surgical management of the peptic ulcers, and also the prevention of the ulcers. So this is the very, very important. So how to prevent the ulcers? So if anybody identify with the H. pylori bacteria infections, and also in case of the NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. So you already having some previously, if anybody in like a history of the peptic ulcers, if you go to the doctors, so you have to explain clearly about your problem to the doctors. For example, if you got any pains or any stomach, or maybe any joint pain or any injury, so sometimes doctors are going to prescribe the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. So before giving these drugs, so if you explain about your previous history, past history of the stomach ulcers, so you are allergic to, or you are more prone to get the peptic ulcers because of the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. So you have to explain to the doctors before giving the medications. So these medications, if we explain, the doctors are going to give the alternation. They're going to give the another medication alternative to the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. So that is the one medications. And also next one is going to be, so if in case of, so opt for the lowest effective dose of the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, take with a meal. So if you want to prevent, so we have to take all these NSAIDs with the meal only, we can prevent the some high secretion of the gastric release, so we can prevent the peptic ulcers. And also who are like a habituated or taking high alcohol, or maybe who are addicted to smoking and also alcohol. So if they stop or if they quit these addictions, so we are going to prevent the helpful to prevention of the peptic ulcers. So these, especially these smoking and also alcohol is damaging the mucosa of the gastric and also the intestinal mucosa. So will help to reducing the stress and also will releasing the HCl concentration and also help to prevent the HCl concentrations. And also one more important thing is the dietary modifications and also lifestyle modifications. So dietary modifications means, so who are more prone to get the like these peptic ulcers, so they have to take like a personalized like a tolerance foods. So for example, who are like a more prone to get the peptic ulcers, so related to the any gastric irritations such as with alcohol or coffee and caffeine, spicy food, and also foods, carbonated beverages, chocolates. Sometimes it depends upon the person to person, it may irritate the gastric like a mucosa. So in those people, so if they identify what is the causative factors, so if they avoid those food materials, so we can prevent the gastric ulcers and also duodenal ulcers. And also if they eat the food in a hurry manner, so if they eat like a very large amount of food and also in a hurry, so if they are not properly chewing, so it may use the food is going to be indigestion, may chance to get the indigestion. If the food stays prolonged time in the stomach, so it may use the HCl concentration, so it may use the damage to the mucosa. So that is the reasons. So should avoid the large quantities of the food and also have to chew it properly. So if they chew and also if they take like a little meals and also small meals, so it may help to increasing the digestion process easily and also prevent the peptic ulcer formations. And also avoid lying down 2 to 3 hours after the eatings. So and also who are like taking sleeping, so after the food also may chance to get the may chance to get the peptic ulcers. So if anybody having the smoking, so if it delay the healing. So that's why avoid to smoking and alcohol. And also better always chewing the food. So if they eat and also chew properly, so it's going to releasing the enzymes in the mouth with the saliva, and also it easily helps, it helps to easily digestions. So this is the main dietary considerations. And also if they take meals are going to be 5 to 6 small meals per day, compared to if they take the large meals, the 3 meals also may chance to get the these peptic ulcers. And also rest few minutes before and after the each meal. So only should not sleep or more than 2 or 3 hours, just a small nap. So also will help to, but it should be in the like in the reclining positions, and also it should be always in the always sit upright in a chair while eating. So should not be in the lying on the prone lying positions or maybe abnormal sitting positions. So it may give the uncomfort, and also it may chance to get the peptic ulcers. And also enjoy your last meal or snacks at least 3 hours before the bedtime. So and also before at least in the night time, if they're sleeping at 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock, at least 3 hours, 6 o'clock, if they finish the dinner or supper, whatever the last meal, so at least minimum 2.5 to 3 hours is going to be like prevent these peptic ulcers formations. So these are some modifications along with some like healthy style modifications to avoid the oily food or junk food, and also alcohol intake of the alcohol, and also if you avoid the smoking. So these things are going to be helpful to prevent the peptic ulcers. So these are the main important like a precautionary measures to avoid the peptic ulcers. So that's all about the peptic ulcers. Hope you understand. Okay, see you in the next class. Thank you very much.